All right, Proposition 7 then.
Proposition 7, I'll give you just the bottom line and then give a little bit of background on the measure. So Proposition 7 would give the legislature the authority with a 2/3 vote in the legislature to change daylight savings time, such as potentially going to year-round daylight savings time, as long as federal government, or the federal law allows that change. So just a little bit of background on sort of the legal context here. So federal law establishes standard time zones for different parts of the country. For example, California is in Pacific Standard Time. It also requires those times to be moved forward 1 hour from mid-March, or excuse me, early March to early November, time known as daylight savings time. Currently, federal law does not allow states to adopt year-round daylight savings time, but it does give them the option to have no daylight saving time and stay on standard time, and a couple of states currently do that. One other piece of context, in 1949, the state, California voters passed a proposition which established daylight saving time in California. And so the legislature does not have the ability to change daylight saving time without going back for voter approval. So this measure would give the legislature the authority to make changes to daylight savings time in a way that are consistent with federal law going forward, as long as there was a 2/3 vote in the legislature. So there are no direct fiscal effects associated with this measure, because any of the future effects would depend on future actions by the legislature if it were to change daylight saving time, and potentially changes in federal law. For example, if the federal government changed their law to allow year-round daylight savings time, then the legislature could then make that change as well. If it did end up making those types of changes in the future, there could be a variety of effects on things such as energy use. There could be effects on kind of short-term things associated with the time changing twice a year, going on and off of daylight saving time, which could potentially affect things like worker productivity or accidents during certain times of the year. But overall, those effects are uncertain and likely minor effect on state and local governments.
Thank you. So in support, we have the Democratic Party and Democratic organizations, and also smaller Green Party organizations. In opposition, smaller Republican organizations, but not the statewide Republican Party. In support, we have members of the legislature who put it forward, and then in opposition, we have a mix of members of the legislature as well. There are a couple of media organizations in opposition, none in support. The SACB is one of those that is in opposition. And there is not funding on that one at all. So that's why you haven't heard about it at all, probably. All right, questions on Prop 7?
I must be particularly stupid, but so there's really nothing's going to happen. If we voted for this, right, it basically, I'm really trying to understand it. I'm sorry, I'm really just not getting this.
So it would give the legislature the authority to make changes to daylight savings time, for example.
If the feds made changes.
If that change is allowed under federal law. Right now, federal law allows states to have no daylight savings time. It does not allow states to adopt year-round daylight savings time. So if the legislature wanted to make that change, there would need to be a federal law change first. But if maybe to partially answer your question as well, if this measure were to pass, the current system of daylight savings time would remain in effect until the legislature, so it remains in effect for a certain time during the year, and then it goes back to standard time. So that.
Okay.
So let me.
Clear as mud, right?
Sorry. So maybe I'll back up and just sort of set up just daylight savings time, kind of how it works. So in early March each year, the clocks spring forward 1 hour, and then in early November, the clocks move back 1 hour. And so that system, even if this measure were to pass, that system would stay in place. It would only be if the legislature were to make a change with a 2/3 vote in the future that system might change.
Okay, thanks.
So if my understanding is correct, if the legislature made that change, it would be putting more time in the evenings in the winter, essentially.
Yeah, so
That's the only direction they could go, right?
So adopting, if they were to adopt year-round daylight savings time, which would require a change in federal law, then yes, it would kind of in the winter months, the sun would rise at a later hour and would set at a later hour than it currently does.
All right.
Yeah. There's another provision in the bill, or excuse me, in the measure that talks about giving the legislature the authority to change the dates and times of daylight savings time. And so there's some uncertainty around whether or not that kind of gives them the authority to adopt no daylight savings time at all. So kind of go the other direction.
Thank you.
That was my question. It could go either way. It isn't just one way or nothing.
Yeah, so just getting rid of daylight savings time and being on standard time year-round, it might give them the ability to do that, but there's some uncertainty around that.
So yes, nothing, nothing.